Hi, everyone. I am Kelly Walters, and we are live on our Heat Press for Profit podcast. And I have an awesome guest with me today. And some of you know him. If you don't, then guess what? You are in for a treat. Dane Clement is going to be joining us as we go over how to get started with graphic design for t-shirt printing. Now, there might be a ton of questions that come in as we are going just over some topics, some great tips and tricks. Please feel free to ask them because while we have Dane here, this is a great time to get some questions answered from an expert, a pro. And if we don't get a chance to answer them, then we'll make sure that we get them answered later on. But, the biggest thing about getting started with graphic designer, especially when it comes to t-shirt printing, is sometimes people just get really hung up on graphic design. I'm not a graphic design artist. I'm not trained in any sort of manner. And I know that if I see something, it's going to come out more of a doodle. So how do I take that doodle and make it what I want? So Dane is really going to help guide us through programs, things to consider because not all graphic design is going to be equal when it comes to screen printing, vinyl cutting, and even full color design. So, Dane, let's see. We've already got people commenting in. So good morning from Central Texas and Ottawa. Now, guys, Dane is the VP of Art of Creative Process for Stahls. So his knowledge is immense. So Dane, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm really, really glad that you are hopping on.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's fun.
Let's just dive right in. And one of the biggest questions I always get is what's the difference between raster and vector art?
All right. That's a great one because that's the first thing I try to answer when I do all my seminars and things because it can get confusing, right? Because sometimes a raster art design or a piece could look like a vector piece and it doesn't work the same. So basically, the difference is, and that's basic. We only need to know two different types of artwork for our industry. We need to know vector artwork and we need to know raster, right? That's it. We don't need to know 3D. We don't need to know video editing. We don't need to know dancing, right? I mean, all that stuff doesn't matter, right? We just need to know those two. And vector it's basically, it's all computerized. It's created with nodes and lines. And what I mean by that is when you're in a program, many of them, you click your mouse and it puts a node that's a little square dot, and then you click again and it'll connect those two. So if you click it and hold your mouse down and you move your mouse, it's going to give you what's called a Bezier handle, which is these little handles that come out, and that just allows you to create a shape or bend the curve however you want. So the cool thing about a vector design is it's infinitely scalable, right? So you can create something at 3 inches and I can blow it up size of a building and it looks exactly the same. It just recalculates, right? It's all math. So you have a node here and a node here, and if it's connected with a straight line, the nodes could be 100 feet apart, and it's still just going to connect with a straight line, right? So it's a scalable thing, which is awesome. Raster artwork, on the other hand, most people, this is where I do it. I usually do a raise your hand if you know what raster, or have you ever heard of raster? And I could have 50 people in a class, and like 3 people will raise their hand. And it's funny because everybody knows what raster is, right? If you got one of these things, phone, you took a picture, that selfie you took, click, you just created a raster file, right? It's just a pixel-based continuous tones type of image. And that could be a photograph. It could be a painting. So when I take if I painted that white canvas back there, hopefully soon, we'll have color on it. You take a picture of that and then it's a raster piece. When I paint it, it's just a painting. But when you take a picture, you scan it in digitally using a scanner, all those things will just convert it to digital, but it's continuous tone, right? So there is no nodes per se. So you can't select, like if I'm going to draw a t-shirt shape in a vector program, I can just click on the inside of that shape and drop a color on it. I can click on the inside of the shape and I can move it. A raster design is different. Like if you took a picture of this ugly mug and you wanted to click on my head, It doesn't work, right? You have to use selection tools and do different things. So it's just two different scenarios as far as the style of artwork. But to me, they're both necessary. So if you have vinyl cutter, for instance, and you want to just cut graphics for your vinyl, whether it's a Cricut silhouette or rolling or whatever, it has to be done in vector artwork, because the vector line around that you drew or you scanned or you created, that's what tells that cutter where that knife blade goes, right? If you just send a TIFF or JPEG or a PNG, it doesn't recognize that file because it doesn't have a cut line. It doesn't know what to do with it unless you put one in there. So for vinyl cutting, you have to know vector. And for nowadays with full color graphics out there, there's so many ways to create full color graphic, from dye sublimation to the ultra color max stuff that we have at Stahls to, any of those kinds of things. You can use both. You can have full color vector or full color raster. So now you're just open the doors up to as much creativity as you have. So
for somebody that is looking at starting a t-shirt business and, they are looking at getting a silhouette or a Cricut, I know, right, that they need vector artwork
yeah.
whenever they're going to be cutting. But for somebody that just purchases a Cricut and knows nothing about, the artwork needing to be vectorized, when they've got, like I have Silhouette Design Space for the silhouette that I have. If I am creating an art through that program, is it already vectored? Or if I bring in art that, I found online, is it already vectored, or how would I be able to tell?
Right. So I wish I could show you, but I don't have anything available here just to share my screen with. But so if you create it in the Silhouette software, then yeah, it's already vectorized, right? That's all it handles because that's what's necessary in order for you to cut anything out of it. If you grab things online, different scenario altogether. Depends on where you get it from. If you get it from a source that has vector files and it's designed for cutting and that sort of thing, then chances are you got no problem. It's probably an SVG file, typically some sort of EPS, or maybe it's an Illustrator Corel Draw file, right? Whatever the source is, they're all different. But usually the software will require SVGs. Will be the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
And then if it says SVG, unless they just added that extension to a JPEG or something, you should be good. But it won't recognize and work with those other files. Now it might place it if you can print it and then come back and cut it out later, but you won't be able to cut anything with it.
Got it. So what are some good places to really get started with, creating vector art, or programs, or?
Right. Okay. So the vector stuff, I would say whatever your cutter is, typically is the easiest place to start. Like, especially if you have no clue and you're brand new and you just bought a box and you didn't even open it yet, kind of thing, right? All of them will come with something, right? So from the Cricuts to the Silhouettes to the rolling, cutters, right? They will all come with some sort of program to get you started. Now, usually they're not the best places to create your own way. Once you get familiar with it and want to really kind of raise your game as far as creating the art itself, you might want to do some other programs. But the first place to start is whatever software came with your cutter, because it's going to be all vector for sure. And it's, you create your, even just put a name up there. Happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way. See, there you go. Right. Look, I got green. I'm not even Irish. What the heck? So, but yeah, it's whatever. That's the first place I'd start. Right. Second place would be like a CADWorks Live, right? As a online service that Stahls has. That's a pretty good one. Got a lot of clip art in there, and it's a lot of features and a lot of cool things. And then you can start raising the bar into professional level stuff. I don't use a whole lot of other free online software that you can plug in, download, put on my computer. There's GIMP and there's Inkspaces and things like that. I'm not a big fan of that personally. I don't have it. But if you wanted to try other vector programs, it's Corel Draw would be one. Adobe Illustrator would be another one. There's an Affinity program, which is Affinity Designer is their vector program. So when you start getting to the professional level, or just a little, raise it above with the software cutters come with. Those are probably the top three on my list, I would think.
So, like I said earlier, I have no problem admitting I am not graphically trained.
Right.
So, when it comes to using programs like Corel, Adobe, or Affinity, um, for some people, those can be maybe intimidating programs.
Mhm.
You can take classes at, or a community college. I don't know if you can do online community college, but how would somebody just kind of dive into those programs that might feel a little bit more intimidated at the beginning?
Okay, so well, first let's discuss a little bit more about the programs, right? So, for instance, I use it. I'm an Adobe user. I use Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator. So let's just talk first about the differences, right? So Adobe Illustrator would be the vector program, and that's where you would create your artwork for your cutter. You can create logos and lots of things in Illustrator, right? But I think where the intimidation factor comes from what my sense of being in this industry for 28 years, maybe, and teaching for maybe that long, right? It's a big program, right? Photoshop and Illustrator, they're just professional level stuff. They're high end. There are all kinds of stuff going on, and it just intimidates everybody, and you get scared to do anything. First thing I'll tell you is you can't break it, so don't worry about it, right? You're not going to break nothing. Just start playing. Just literally clicking on tools and pushing stuff around and see how it operates and see what these tools can do, right? So it's just a matter of saying the program can fill this room full of capabilities, but in our industry, we're looking for that much space. This is all I need to focus on to get my cutter to cut. Or in Photoshop, this is all I need to do to create my artwork so I can have it dye sublimation or send it off to have transfers made in full color. I don't need to know everything. I just need to know one little component of it. And once you know those kinds of things, it just makes it easier to jump that hurdle, right? It's if once they see the first time that they actually can do this, then all that stuff goes away and they focus on that one little piece. Now the cool thing is, once you figure out what it takes for me to get transfers made or print something on my die sub printer, whatever my scenario might be, then if I wanted to start learning the more of the capabilities, because remember, it can fill this room with capability, then I can just start playing and trying certain things because I know I can get my core business stuff done with the smaller components of it. Adobe Illustrator and Adobe in general, the biggest drawback from those guys is it's a monthly subscription, right? It's for the suite, and you get all this stuff, or you can get just Photoshop for, I don't know, maybe it's $20 a month, or just Illustrator. But most people get the suite, so it's like $53 a month, right? That's a lot of money for startups or for people just getting going. But that's the software that they teach in most schools, right? So if you grow in your business, you want to hire a designer, chances are that they're going to know how to use Adobe products. Now, I will tell you this: I mentioned it, Affinity Designer, and there's Affinity Photo. So basically, Raster version is Affinity Photo, and Affinity Designer is the vector software. Just like Adobe Illustrator is the vector, and Adobe Photoshop is the raster, right? The photographic image editor, continuous tone stuff is the photo part, and the other ones is the vector. So you need both. So, but the Affinity thing, the cool thing is, it is very, very, very much like Photoshop and Illustrator. Like, so close. I'm amazed that it's legal. I mean, that's how crazy it is. But it's rock solid. They don't crash. They just work. I've been teaching a lot more these days, the last couple of years, because it's killer software, and it's a one-time payment of, like, now it's up $70. It was 50, but there's always sales, so you can get like 40% off that $70 thing, and then now all of a sudden you have professional level capabilities, but very inexpensively, because you pay it once and it's done. You don't have to keep paying every month and that sort of thing. And most, a lot of the updates are free. You only have to update it, when it goes through like a big major change. So I've had it probably for 3 or 4 years, and I only had to update it once, pay for the update. It's been updated on its own multiple times, and it just keeps getting better. So great rock solid software if you're looking for something that's professional level, but not as expensive as Adobe products would be that. And then there's Corel Draw out there. And Corel Draw has Corel Photo Paint. That's their raster version. I don't use it anymore. I used to use it quite a bit, but They left the Mac platform years ago. They came back to it, but they kind of didn't come back to it in a real way, because the thing about these first two programs, Adobe and Affinity, is whether I'm working on a Mac, which I work on, or a PC, the only differences are like the Option and the Alt key, right? And a Control key and a Command key. That's it. Everything else looks the same, works the same, all that. So it makes it easy to go back and forth or, change. But Corel is different. There's a lot of stuff that they don't have on a Mac anymore. So it's just not the same. So I don't use it, right? So, but that's just me. If you grow up in Corel and something that you have, your shop that, your company you're working for, you learned on it and you want to keep it, then keep it. I'm not selling any of them or saying you got to use a certain one, but it's there. That's the reason I don't use it anymore. So
options are great, especially if it's a trial and error and you found something that you enjoy using, knowing that you have all of this knowledge and you're trained.
Right.
So I think that speaks volumes, just in terms of somebody learning a newer program, especially if, like I said, it could be a little intimidating. But so when we're looking at raster artwork, would you say that raster is being used more and more versus vector?
So my short answer would say yes. It's because the technologies are changing, right? So before, vector was always the go-to because vinyl cutting just needed to do it that way. Screen printing, a lot of people only, if they're a screen printer themselves, all they know how to do is vector artwork to screen print, or you can use, get artwork from like Transfer Express, right? To get the transfers, screen printed, goof proof stuff. But that was, typically vector art that they use in a designer, which is changing, by the way. So, there's a lot of vector out there, and it's been used for a long time, right? But these days, with the DTF transfers and dye sublimation equipment and direct-to-garment printers and all the stuff that's out there, the raster files are gaining big time because it's full color, right? It's finally we can print anything we want just about and print it in full color. And if you're using a service like Transfer or Stahls ID, then you can get just a couple of them, and it's very inexpensive. And, it's like the world creativity just opened up, right? We can decorate anything we want, one color or full color now, right? So you got all kind of capabilities. And so I think right now the momentum is definitely on straight up trajectory for raster files.
So we actually had a really good question that I think will kind of segue beautifully into kind of creating or setting up a raster file properly.
Yeah.
So there was a question that, let me go back and find it. Where did it go? Yeah. It was about uploading. Okay, so Alpha 3 said, I do my designs with Photoshop and save them in PDF or PNG with 300 DPI. Yet, when it is uploaded into the Stahls or transfer system, I still get the low image quality. So do you have any points or tips on that? As well as just, the best practices for setting up that file.
Right. So first thing, let's talk about the file, right? So good on you. That was perfect. The 300 pixels per inch is awesome. That's where you need to be. So let me just explain it for everybody else. So when you create your artwork, like Great Dane Graphics, when we create our full color graphics, we'll go 14 inches by 14 inches, right? And we set that file up at 300 pixels per inch. And that means that anything we paint or create inside there is high resolution. Now, that doesn't mean I can get a little bitty business card type of graphic, or somebody can, give me something off the internet that's 1 inch by 1 inch at 72 pixels per inch, and I just throw it in that 14 by 14 at 300 pixels per inch. It's just going to work, because it won't. But when you create your designs, if you go with that high resolution, you should be able to print anything you want, right? And basically, that's the only thing you need to do to start working in raster artwork, right? It's the file preparation. So what you should think about is, what am I designing for, right? So if you're designing for, some sort of mug, right, or a t-shirt or whatever, a bag, a tote, whatever it might be, what's the size of that piece? Now, the reason we go 14 by 14 is because our customers want to print on anything. So I don't really want to dictate what to do. So if you're going to print a tote bag and a mug and a hat, then create your artwork at the largest size. So my tote bag, whatever it's going to be, created at that size at 300 pixels, because you can always reduce a raster file down to fit anything and have enough resolution. If you created it for a hat and you wanted to blow it up for a tote, then it's going to get pixelated and blurry and soft looking, and it won't really work out well. So that's the critical part of our raster, is the actual pixels per inch. I think Affinity calls it DPI, which is not technically correct, but that's what they call it. It's the same thing. But yeah, so that's how you set up the file. Now, the thing about the EasyView Designer, I've only come across that once, but what I did notice when you upload it and you get that error, if you look at the sizing, there's a to the left, there should be a tab. You might see it, right? It may say something like 24 by 30 inches. And it might just be some sort of glitch where it went to 72 pixels, which made it bigger. So in there, just put the size that you want. If it's an 8-inch image, put 8 by 8 or whatever it is that the original was, and see if that helps you. But other than that, then that might just be a customer service question. I'm not sure. I had to see it actually happen to try to determine what it was. But the resolution is correct, and it's definitely not low res. You should be good to go with that.
I actually had exactly what you just mentioned happen to me last week. So I had uploaded a file. I knew that the quality was great. And simply by changing my dimensions, I went from potentially having low quality art to just fine. So that's a great tip, to just make sure everybody is, just checking your dimension in there. And like you said, Dane, if that is something that doesn't fix the issue at hand, then let's definitely get someone in touch with customer service, and we can walk through and figure that out.
Yeah, they'll figure out something, because you're plenty good resolution wise with that.
The 300.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you say, that was a lot of information packed with some excellent tips. So thank you on the raster size. So let's go over back to vinyl for just a second. What are some tips that you would give to those that are just getting started in vinyl cutting, or maybe wanting to change their position on how they feel about vinyl cutting with the amount of dimensional products and textured products that are getting developed?
Sure. So one thing that you need to consider when you're creating artwork for vinyl cutting is, first thing I think about is, one, what is it going on, right? What sort of materials? And then the two is, what materials am I using? And when it comes to the artwork, that's the most important part, because if I'm going to go on a jacket or something, we're going to put a flock or something really heavy duty, like glitter flake even, right? It needs to be, your artwork needs to be beefier, like thicker lines and thicker areas of coverage, right? Because even if you're using some thin materials, some other things you need to worry about is the cavity sizes, right? So you don't want to have too many holes in your image. You want to be opening those up so you can pull from one piece and it's connected to the next section, and it just so you can just kind of pull a whole string of stuff out and throw it away, and less weeding time is key. Another thing that we do is we have this really high tech way to check our files as we work on them. So you ready for this? You guys, you ate your Wheaties this morning? Because this one's pretty complicated. This MIT stuff I'm about to share. So you want to create a circle, right? In your program, no matter what program you use, I don't care. Create that circle at 1/16 of an inch, which is what? I got a cheat sheet somewhere. 0.06 is close enough, right? So if you make a circle 0.06 in size and colorize it, bright pink or bright green or whatever, that's what I do. And then create your artwork, and then just grab that circle and start moving it around. And the reason that's helpful is because if that's a really small cavity or a really thin line, and that's like the absolute thinnest I would go. If I'm going to create a thicker product, I'd probably go with 1/8 of an inch, like a 0.125, because it makes it that much, double the size. So walk that little circle all around your design to see if you're drawing something like the outline of a t-shirt. If that outline is thinner than that circle, then I want to make sure I make it thicker in order for it to work properly when I cut it. Something else to avoid is very long, thin, tapered points, right? So if you got a long, thin point, what happens is that cutter's got to cut up, and it's literally going to turn and pivot, and it's going to end up ripping your vinyl, and it's going to come back down. But the problem with long, thin things, it wants to come up on the carrier sheet, right? So if I got long and I'm starting to weed the backgrounds, at a 16th of an inch, there's not enough adhesive or enough space, area space for that thing to stay on that carrier very well. So you got to be really careful when you weed it. So ways to avoid that is check that circle, make it wider than that circle. If it's coming to a point, obviously at some point it's going to be smaller than the circle, and that's fine. But it's a long, thin taper. So if you got something long and thin, try to make it less so. Like try to blunt up the corner a little bit, or better yet, round that corner. If you make a little rounded corner, then the blade just will come and turn right around it and continue on, right? It doesn't have to stop and pivot, because when it stops and pivots, it starts tearing the corners. And I know how many of us want to throw away that blade and get a new one out all the time, right? So most important thing you can do, by the way, it'll save yourself a lot of grief. You won't have to pick through with your X-Acto blade in one hand and your pick tool in the other, right? It'll be one of those deals. But use sharp blades, obviously, but the size of your artwork to stay on the carrier sheet so you can transfer it onto your garment is key when it comes to that. Those are probably the top 3 things off the top of my head that I would say to consider for vinyl cutting.
The little circle, that's an excellent little tip there. You can create that within a second on most of those programs.
Yeah, anyone, right? But it's zoom in on it and just move it around. And if it's thinner, then if it fits inside your lines, then you're good. And if there's cavities too, make sure it fits. It needs to be, the cavity or the lines need to be bigger than that circle shape. And then it's just going to be a lot less headache to weed. That's all.
So let's go over. Going back to Raster, because vinyl is excellent for all of the dimensional and creating different textures, and just kind of bringing in the height and dimension that you might not be able to do, say, with a flat media, maybe like direct to film. But the full color capabilities that you can get with Ultra Color Max is just absolutely insane. And with direct to film becoming more and more popular, and our product Ultra Color Max, like you said, you can do a 1 color if you would like, or you could do 50 colors. It's really just dependent on your art. So if you are, in the process of setting up your raster file, you've got your good file that we already, went over. You've created a great file. When you're uploading that and you're thinking about decorating with Ultra Color Max, are there some things that you should consider? Obviously, with vinyl, we think about the thickness of stems or cavities, but with Max, what do we need to consider?
Yeah, sure. So some things to think about is, one is the size, right? So if I'm going to create something at 14 by 14 and I want to print it, on a small bag or a shirt or a left chest, even, I don't need a logographic that size into the designer or to use basically on anything for that particular garment, right? So what I would do is create your original 14 by 14 and 300 pixels. And then if it's going to be just a left chest, and I know that's going to be maybe 3.5 to 4 inches, but I would make my file maybe 6 to 7. So you just want to save it as a PNG, make it a little bit smaller, so it's manageable and easy to upload and things. And then when you upload it, you can fine tune it in a designer. I can say, I want this at 3.5 and do it that way. Another little trick I'll say before you get to that part is, if it's going to be a left chest and maybe it's a big circle design, right? And I would tell everybody, if you can, to print it out on a piece of paper, black and white laser printer, inkjet printer, doesn't matter, just to see the sizing, right? And I know it sounds goofy because, well, I know it's a circle and it's 3 inches. So I know what a 3-inch circle is. So do I. But when you're working in a computer and you got this big old white screen and you just sort of moving things around and you make it 3 inches, if it's a solid beefy circle, when you print it out, you say, ooh, that's looks extra big because it's got so much coverage or something. And it's going to look ridiculously large on my left chest type of thing. So it just helps you to literally see it if it's going to work. I can't tell you how helpful that part is. We do it all the time. I've done it my whole career because once I have it in a computer, everything looks right. I double check it by printing it. So yeah, that's just a sidebar note that a trick that I do all the time. And I think if you start doing that, you'll notice how helpful it is.
That's awesome. I mean, I've learned so much from you on this, and I talk to you all the time about ideas and art. So
I did have one more thing on that same note, right? So another thing to consider and stay away from for now. I can't say certain things, but they got a lot of coolness coming to the design. I'm super excited about. So for right now, you got to avoid soft edges, right? So don't do faded edges. If I have a direct-to-garment printer, or if you have somebody that you buy direct-to-garment prints from, they can print anything you want. It can go soft and fade it out into the shirt and whatever, right? We can't do that with DTF. Some companies in some places will tell you they can, but I would not recommend it, because what happens when the DTF, the way the technology works, is we have to print the design, right? And then we got to back it with white and an adhesive, and then that's got to go through and get powdered and all this sort of thing. Well, the problem is if it fades to nothingness, then there's not enough of a spot or enough coverage for that adhesive to work to stay on the carrier and then make it to the shirt. So it'll just sort of break off and not stick. And it might look okay. Usually it doesn't. Usually you'll see the white all around, like halos and the softer edges. But when you smash it down, it might look okay, but as soon as you wash it, those edges are going to fall off, right? So those are some things to consider. So if you're going to do it, then fake a halftone. You can do that in Photoshop or, Affinity Photo. Or if you're not to that level, then just take that soft edge image and paste it inside of a shape. So for instance, another thing you can do, if you go to greatdanegraphics.com and look at the video training, there's a bunch of videos up there that I did for EasyView or in EasyView. And one of them was a swimmer design, I think. So we use a water splatter shape, right? And then I took a swimmer guy and we pasted him inside of it. So it has really cool, full color, soft edge, but it's inside the shape. So it just avoid soft edges for now. I'm going to tell you that just for now.
For now.
Right. We're working on some really good stuff, but not there yet.
I love it. For those of you that are tuning on the podcast, there was a wink after that. So just know that there's for those that are tuning in live, they got to see Dane with his little wink. Right. So we are coming up on our time, and Dane, with all of the information, the knowledge that you have, where can people continue to learn from you specifically?
Well, actually, I do lots of trade shows, all the Impressions trade shows. I do Printing United and things like that. So, and DAX shows. So if you're in any of those cities, you can come see me live. I'll do, lots of different classes. Great Dane Graphics has a bunch of free videos, a bunch of pay for, videos on there. And we're going to be doing a whole lot more stuff on Stahls TV pretty soon here. So.
That's awesome. So Dane, thank you so much for tuning in, or not tuning in, joining us. And everybody, thank you all so much for tuning in live. If you guys have any other questions, pop them down below and we will try to get them answered throughout the time that these videos are live or posted. And then, of course, if you all have questions, you know how you can reach out to us. You can find us in the Heat Press for Profit Facebook group. You can reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. The channels are endless, and we're always here to help. So thank you so much, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you. See ya.